Okay, so this movie picks up where the last one left off. It suddenly cut off, so I'm sorry it sort of cut off in the middle. But last we were looking at our positioning movie. We had just taken the article section out of normal document flow and assigned it a top value of 50 pixels and a left value of 200 pixels. And that's going to be positioned relative to the wrapper div because we gave the wrapper div a relative positioning value. And we can review that in our CSS. Right. Here's the wrapper. We just said position relative. Here's our article. We gave it absolute positioning, 50 pixels, 200 pixels. Again, if we had not given the wrapper absolute or given a positioning value to the wrapper, look what's going to happen if I take this out. Okay, this now is positioning relative to the top of the browser window. So this is 200 pixels from this is 50 pixels from the top and 200 pixels from the left, because nothing else has a positioning value. So that's why we had to give the wrapper div a positioning value so that we can position this within it. So I'm going to reassign my relative position. And now when we go back, okay, now the top of the article section is 50 pixels down from the wrapper and 200 pixels to the left of the wrapper. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do, we have a couple problems. This is not quite in the place where it fits nicely here. It's a little bit too high up and probably a little bit too far to the left and not wide enough here. But another problem that we have is the stuff is just creeping up underneath it. So to fix this, the first thing that we're going to do, actually let's work on the article section first. So we're going to try to give it a larger top value. This is 50, so this is maybe 70. And we're going to expand the width. I think 530 is what we used in the float movie. We may have to move this over a little bit. Okay, so let's just try all that. So in my article, I'm going to say the width is 530. The top, instead of 50, is maybe 70. The left is maybe 230. And I know that because of the padding that I know is attached to the navigation. Okay, much better. We're almost there. Looks like we could probably just scooch this over a few more pixels or widen it a few more pixels. So let's go back to the CSS. And let's say this is 235. Let's see what that does. Okay, so it needs to be a little closer and a little wider both. There is a way to figure this out exactly. Let's try 232 and 533. And that would be to add up all of the padding and margins and positioning. That's still not quite right. This is probably 535. Sorry, I want the CSS. So 535, and maybe let's go back to 230, see what happens. Okay, that's good enough for now. I'm still maybe a couple pixels off, but I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, the next problem is I need to push this down. Now in the float, because both of these were floating, all we had to say here was clear the float. But it's a little more complicated when you use positioning, but you get a little more control. So the first thing that we have to do, just like in the float example, is we have to give a height to the wrapper. Remember, the wrapper is the thing that's encompassing all the other divs. So I'm going to go back to the CSS, and I'm going to assign a height to the wrapper. And that's not really going to change things, but it's going to get things started. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a height to the navigation, and this is what we did also in the float example. And I'm going to set the height to 100%. Okay, now that's looking a little bit better, sorry. There we go. So now we have that working. We once again have the same issue where although the navigation is 100% fills up the entirety of the wrapper, the article does not. So we can fix that by assigning the article 100% in the height. And we use percentages in this case instead of numbers because we've assigned a number to the wrapper, 1,000 pixels. But there's going to be a little bit of variation in the height between the navigation and the article. Or actually this might be slightly bigger, the footer might be slightly smaller. So it's better just to use percentage to do the heights within the wrapper div. Okay. Now I still have a problem. It looks like I need to be a little bit wider and maybe even push this down a little bit. So let's see. I'm going to go to the article. Okay, so the top, maybe we make that 71 pixels, and the width, maybe we make it 540. See what happens there. Okay, that's looking much better. We still have a little extra thingy down here. Let me see if that's in the browser. We may have to get rid of a margin. Yeah, there might be a margin here on the footer, although it's hard to see. It's hard to tell if that's there or not. I think in a previous version of this I put a margin top 0 on the footer. Let me see if that works here. So there's that little green line in between the top of the footer and the article section. So let's just try this. Margin top 0 pixels. Okay, well, I'll figure out what that is. But at any rate, that is the basic method of positioning, using positioning as the way that you position. The alternative to using positioning is to using floats. And they both have some pluses and minuses. If you have more than a simple 2-column layout, you really must use positioning. If you have a 2-column layout, you can use floats. But you have to keep track of how wide everything is, how tall everything is, to make sure that all of your elements fit.